welcome everyone to another edition of Compelling Conversations with me, Rabbi Sanford Akselrad. And we are so pleased to have with us our very special friend and guest, Jonathan Ornstein, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Jewish Community Center in Krakow in Poland. So he's traveling a long way virtually to have this conversation, but it's important. As I reflect back, the first time that I met Jonathan was a couple months after the war in Ukraine broke out. That was in February 2022. And at that time, the world was extremely concerned. It was on everybody's radar. What would happen to Ukraine? What was Russia doing? And as things unveiled and the war got worse and worse, with very quickly, a lot of the people started to leave Ukraine. And where did they go? A lot of them went to Krakow. And that created a humanitarian disaster. And we wondered who in the world was going there to help. And lo and behold, there was the Jewish community in Krakow, which Jonathan heads, and they were the first ones to say, Hineni, here I am. We are there to help, and help they did. A short while after that, and we'll go back with Jonathan to explain how he pivoted the mission of the JCC, there was a group of rabbis that were talking online saying, we need to do something. And so I personally joined a group of rabbis who went in April 9th to 14th in 2022 to Poland, which is where I met Jonathan for the first time. And we wanted to help. In a very quick span of time, I think it was less than 2 weeks, collectively, we brought over $700,000 of aid and over 2 tons of food to the JCC. Although it was appreciated, I'm sure it was a drop in the bucket of what the needs were and what was raised. A bit after that, I really don't like what I call one-offs. I really like it when the relationship continues, especially one as important to this. And Jonathan came out to Congregation near Tamid January 20th to 22 in 2023 as our first international scholar, and he spent the weekend. And before he came, I said, Jonathan, how busy do you want to be? He said, keep me busy. Little did he know that when you say the word busy at Congregation near Tamid, that means you're busy. So we might touch upon that, but we kept him very, very busy, and we wanted to once again raise awareness. So I've seen Jonathan once or twice since that time, but we both agreed that it's time to once again renew this relationship, reach out to our listeners and especially to Congregation near Tamid members so that we can learn about what's going on and again, how important the help is needed now. So with that, Jonathan, welcome again to our program and to our radar. Take us back in time, if you will, as to what it was like when the war broke out in Ukraine and how you had to pivot the mission of the JCC from what it was to what it became.
Well, what a pleasure to see you again, Rabbi, and to meet your congregation. As you mentioned, I had the opportunity to be on Compelling Conversations before, and to visit you and spend a very, very busy weekend with your wonderful community, and it's great to see you here again. When the war broke out, Krakow is about 2.5 hours drive from the border, and I remember that morning we were very surprised. Although there was a buildup to the war, we didn't think it would actually happen. And we didn't know what was going to happen. We did know that there would be some amount of refugees that would flee into Poland and would come to Krakow as the closest large city to the Polish-Ukrainian border. So the first thing we did was just put up a banner in the blue and yellow color of the Ukrainian flag saying "Welcome" in Ukrainian. I didn't know, maybe there'd be a trickle of refugees and they would walk by our center and they would at least see that the Jewish community is trying to welcome them. Well, that happened and they started to come in, and when they came in, we saw they needed help, and we would run to the store and get them if they needed diapers or a toothbrush, and started to gather supplies, first buying it for them and then local Poles started to see what was happening, that these refugees were coming into our center, and then started to bring us supplies. And we set up a food pantry already on the second day of the war, which grew and grew, and we've never closed it. So since February 25th, 2022, we've had a food pantry in our building that still serves maybe 400 to 500 refugees a day. And that food pantry grew into many other projects, some of which we did and completed, and then some of which are ongoing. And the largest of those was, of course, housing. We saw we were feeding people, but if you're feeding people, and these are, it's worth noting, these are still almost all women and children. Men between 18 and 60 or 18 and 65 are not allowed out of the country. So you have this particularly vulnerable population of women with children, mostly older women, and if they have a place, something to eat, it's helpful, but not if they have something to eat and they're sleeping out on the street in Poland. So we decided to get involved in the housing, and that grew and grew. And then within a couple of weeks of the wars starting, we had become really a full-scale humanitarian aid organization. We went from 35 full-time employees before the war started to 70 after a couple of weeks, which is pretty much where we are now.
So probably never in your wildest dreams did you ever think that the mission of the JCC Krakow would turn on a dime. And I commend you for your leadership and vision and flexibility to respond to a crisis. Why was that so important to you? We know that the primary mission was to serve, this fledgling Jewish community in Krakow, but I know it was a passion of yours that even though 95% of these refugees aren't Jewish, you felt the need to step up.
Yeah, I mean, our mission is to rebuild Jewish life in Krakow, and we're rebuilding Jewish life because of the Holocaust and because of 45 years of communism. And the reason the community needs to be rebuilt after the Holocaust is because almost all the Jews were murdered. But why were they murdered? Besides the fact of the Nazis wanting to murder them, they were murdered because the world stood by for the most part and was
silent.
not too bothered by the plight of the Jews. And if on one hand we're working so hard to rebuild Jewish life and understand particularly our community, both Jews overall, but our local Polish Jewish community, understand what it means to be forsaken by the world, then when we have an opportunity 80 years later to try to prevent the suffering of others, I think it gives us a particular responsibility to do all we can.
Well, as you revive Jewish life, you revive Jewish values. We know that it's a balance about caring about ourselves, but also caring about others. And there's a time and place for both. It's never an either or, it's almost always a both, but the emphasis might change. So here you are a couple of years later. The money came pouring in, the concern came pouring in, the rabbis visited. I know you have, over 140,000 people who visit the center every year as a matter of course. But I'm wondering, has things changed? Have the response in donations changed? And why is it so critical to continue and consider that?
Yeah, the war continues. I mean, the war continues. There are still, at this point, Krakow, a city of 800,000 population, has about 80,000 refugees, again, mostly women and children living in the city. And the need is still there, but the world has moved mostly on. We live in a world with ever shortening attention spans, and the war, this is 27, 28 months into a war that everybody thought would last for a few days or a week or two. And that's just the reality of it. Particularly now, post October 7th, that the focus is on Israel. So it's hard to have more than one crisis in the world at the same time for us to focus on. And I understand that. I'm an Israeli citizen. I don't begrudge any of the support Israel gets, and I think it should get all the support it needs, and we're doing all we can to support Israel. But the Ukrainian part is no longer as important for most people, and the people that have been supporting us as it was. And for the most part, people helped, and you can't you can't expect people to just help forever, people that are far away that aren't Jewish. But I think that we still have this responsibility. We've started helping. We've started housing. We're housing over 200 women and children right now in Krakow and in a facility outside of Krakow. And many of these are really the neediest. I mean, first, some are Jewish Ukrainians in terms of being housed, but these are really the neediest of the people that haven't been able to move on somewhere to the West. They don't have family somewhere. We're talking about people with children with severe autism, with very difficult conditions. Single mothers with 5 children, people that are older, people that are blind, and there's really in Poland no safety net beneath these people. And we've made it our responsibility. We've taken on this responsibility of supporting them. And we're going, our goal is to continue supporting them for as long as it takes and, really for as long as we can. Now that's gotten a lot more difficult, but it doesn't mean that we've given up this mission.
You mentioned the war in Israel. And obviously, as you mentioned, it seems like the world can only focus on one crisis at a time. And I even see in our local news in America that seems to be the case because it seems to be very centric, either on our elections or Trump or whatever. But then when we talk about international, it's almost always Israel and Gaza and what's happening. And so that's what we're being bombarded. And as you mentioned, where the world Jewry is trying to do the best we can to support Israel during this time of crisis. And again, in Israel, we thought maybe based upon past experience, maybe that war would have lasted a week or two or a month. And who knew it was going to last this long and perhaps months longer. So we pray for our friends and brethren in Israel, but we do want to continue to support what's going on with the JCC Krakow. So share, if you could, how could people do that? Where do they send the money, or what should they do when they're in Krakow? They should visit. Give us a few things that people can do.
First, I want to say that we have, Poland is interesting, to go just maybe slightly off topic, which is, the level of anti-Semitism, and you saw it there, that Jewish life, we feel very safe as Jews. So a lot of the awful problems that we're seeing around the world with a dramatic rise in anti-Semitism post October 7th, we're not really seeing in Poland. We've increased security, but we've increased security because we live in a Europe without borders. So Poland is a safe place to be Jewish. And what we're seeing is that we have Israelis that have left other countries in Europe post October 7th and are making their way to Poland. So we have Israelis we have Jewish Ukrainian refugees that made Aliyah when the Ukrainian war started and now have left Israel because they don't feel safe with their children and have come to us. So we're also, on top of the Ukrainian refugee crisis, we're dealing with displaced Israelis and others who are trying to find safety in our community in a Europe that in many ways is not that it was that easy to be Jewish in many places, particularly Western Europe before October 7th. But since October 7th, that has changed. So we've, that's become also part of what we're very, very focused on, supporting these Israelis. But in terms of supporting us, we need, because we've been so focused on Ukraine, we've also haven't really raised money or been as focused as raising money on our regular work, which is supporting Holocaust survivors. We have 58 Holocaust survivors in Krakow. There's no federation. It's a different model than America. We're the ones taking care of them. We have a preschool in our JCC, which is the first Jewish preschool to open since the Holocaust. And people are still finding out they're Jewish. And that's, our main work continues. And since we've been so focused on supporting Ukraine and raising money for Ukraine, a little bit that's also become a challenge for us. So we raise, even without the Ukrainian part, we raise about 95% of our budget overseas. So wow. To raise money, we have a Friends of organization called friendsofjcckrakow.org, where people can go online. It's a 501c3. People can go online and make a tax-deductible donation, whether as an individual, as an organization, and people have a family foundation, donor-advised funds, the whole landscape of philanthropy. Actually, our largest, we don't do an annual dinner, but we do something very special, which is a bicycle ride every year called Ride for the Living, which is
I was gonna ask you about that.
yeah,
That's
so
something that has really grown and
it's
is
really grown.
it's in my bucket list one day to be a part of it as a bike rider. But yeah, go ahead and tell people.
Yeah, we would love to have you. So we do a 60-mile bicycle ride from Auschwitz to the JCC, from the tragedy and darkness of the Holocaust to the light and hope of our reborn Jewish community in Krakow. We have people coming from all over the world
Do
doing
they
this.
bring their own bike, or if they don't have a
Well,
bike, you provide them, right?
we provide, nobody brings their bikes. You just bring a pair of shorts and we'll give you a helmet and a bicycle and insurance, and we take care of everything. And the ride itself is a 1-day bicycle ride, but it's
And
built
you
into
told me that you now have e-bikes, okay, for us
have e-bikes.
people getting
Yeah,
a little older, okay?
we have e-bikes. You can also do part of the ride, and then a bus will take you back to Krakow. We've added a 5K walk for those, some not everyone rides. Sometimes
Right.
there's one partner who wants to, a couple wants to come, or a family, and someone doesn't ride. They like walking. So there's a 5K walk that we do, which is from the camp Washu, the camp in Schindler's List, to the JCC is exactly 5K. And what's really cool about the ride is that the backdrop of the ride, we do it at the end of June, and it's during the Jewish Culture Festival in Krakow, which somehow inexplicably really is the largest Jewish culture festival in the world in its 33rd, 34th year. And the
Wow.
ride is going on. So there's all these activities beyond the ride and, really happening cultural activities and fascinating things. And after the ride, which we do on a Friday, we have a Shabbat dinner for about 750 people that we do, which is just amazing. And every year, this past
What
few
time of
years,
year is this? Is this the end of June, you said?
yeah, the end of June. So coming up in a few weeks, beautiful weather in Krakow. If you want to escape the desert
Heat?
heat, the
Yeah,
desert.
we're only at 113 today, okay? I don't know what that is in centigrade, but
That's about 46 or so. It's a lot.
it's a lot.
I actually, so we have a couple Holocaust survivors that do the ride with us, and I am doing the ride with a 95-year-old Holocaust survivor on a tandem bike named
Okay.
Bernard. And Bernard was in 5 concentration camps,
Wow.
including Auschwitz and Dachau. And he will join me on the tandem bike. He's a very good cyclist. I sit there with the New York Times reading the paper, and he's doing
So
all
if Bernard can do it, anyone can do it, right?
Bernard can do it while pushing Jonathan on the tandem bike. Anyone can do it. But it's a great way to support Bernard, to support what we're doing. We actually have a match. So Bernard and I, if anyone wants to contribute, but the money will be matched. And we're Bernard and I are trying to raise money. We raise money for everything, for all that we're doing with the Israelis, with Ukrainians, with our preschool, taking care of survivors. And that's what Bernard and I are focused on. So Bernard and I are trying to raise $200,000, which is how much we still need
Wow.
to be able to take care of our 58 Holocaust survivors for the coming year.
All right. Seems like a lot of money, but in the scheme of things, it's not that much. It's doable. And I think with
Okay.
Congregation Ner Tamid's help and others, I think you're going to meet your goal.
You've been incredibly, Congregation Ner Tamid has been incredibly generous, both, the money that you were able to raise and bring with you, and then incredibly supportive and generous when I came and had those busy few days in
Your marathon
Las
of
Vegas.
meetings.
People ask me, "Oh, how was it in Las Vegas?" They think like, "Oh, maybe I
You
gave
go,
a
you
talk."
don't know because
Was
you don't
playing,
leave the synagogue.
playing at the slots the whole time. I said I was there, Rabbi. I counted. I gave 12 talks, 12 separate talks, and one radio, one TV, and one print interview. So 12 talks and 3 interviews from Friday until Sunday afternoon. So
That's right. And you had to have a little Shabbos in there, like
a little
30
shop.
minutes.
It was one. I'll tell you what, I loved every minute.
Yeah, it was great fun having you. Well, our time is drawing near. We thank you for being on the program. We're also going to do an article in our bulletin to remind people how they can donate and how important this cause is. And we hope our listeners will respond accordingly. Such a pleasure seeing you again, even if only virtual. And I look forward to seeing you in person in not too distant future. So we're recording this on a Friday, so I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom. And again, thank you for being our special guest.
Shabbat Shalom, my friend, and Shabbat Shalom, and thank you to your wonderful congregation.